In-laws filed false charges and took our son, saying, "You can't keep our grandson from us. We'll destroy you before we let that happen." They sneered, "We raised better children than you ever will." When we went no contact as revenge, they raged, "You're monsters for keeping us from our baby." All right, Reddit, strap in because this story is absolutely wild and I need to get it off my chest. About a year ago, my in-laws decided they didn't like our boundaries, so they called DCF with completely fabricated allegations. They took our 8-month-old baby away from us for months based on nothing but lies. I'm, 26 male, married to my wife, Clara, 25 female, and we've got a 17-month-old son who's basically the coolest little dude on the planet. Before I get into how we burned their lives to the ground, you need to understand who we're dealing with here. Clara's family makes the Lannisters look reasonable. Her dad, William, is basically every toxic boomer stereotype rolled into one human disaster. Dude's ex-Air Force, sorry flyboys, but you know it's true, works some mid-level government contractor job making like 80K, but acts like he's running the CIA. The type of guy who has opinions about everything and gets legitimately butthurt when people don't immediately worship his wisdom. This man tried to control our wedding planning, where we lived, what jobs we took, even how many kids we should have. During our engagement, he literally drove by the apartments we were considering and called landlords, pretending to be a concerned father, warning them about us being young and irresponsible. We only found out when one landlord mentioned the helpful father who'd warned him about us. When we politely told him to chill, he'd go into these passive-aggressive sulks that lasted weeks. I'm talking full teenage girl energy from a 55-year-old man. The guy also showed up at Clara's work Christmas party uninvited because he wanted to meet her colleagues and spent the evening interrogating her boss about her performance and future prospects. Her boss later told Clara it was the most uncomfortable conversation he'd had in 20 years of management. William actually asked if Clara was living up to her potential and whether the company had development programs for young mothers. The secondhand embarrassment was real. Clara's mom, Marilyn, works for DCF in Oregon, and she's the type who thinks her job title makes her an expert on everything. Every conversation starts with, "Well, in my professional experience," like she's Oprah instead of someone who pushes paperwork around. She remembers every slight from the past decade and brings them up during arguments like she's keeping some kind of family grudge scorecard. During family gatherings, Marilyn would corner people and basically conduct informal psychological evaluations. She'd ask Clara's cousins about their relationships, their parenting styles, their coping mechanisms. It was creepy as hell, but she framed it as professional interest and wanting to help family. Then there's Riley, Clara's 23-year-old sister. This girl peaked in high school and never got over it. Still lives at home, works part-time at some boutique selling overpriced candles to suburban moms, and spends most of her energy starting drama between family members. She's got this weird competition thing with Clara where she tries to one-up everything Clara does. When we got engaged, Riley suddenly had to get engaged too. Broke up 3 months later when her boyfriend realized he was dating a psycho. Riley's social media game was next-level toxic. She'd post these passive-aggressive quotes about fake family and people who think they're better than everyone whenever she was mad at Clara. Then she'd play innocent when family members asked what was wrong. Here's a perfect example of how these people operate. We asked for a small, chill baby shower with close friends and family. These lunatics showed up 2 hours early and started rearranging our entire house without asking. William literally moved our furniture around and started grilling on our deck like he owned the place. When Clara asked them to stop, he went full victim mode about how we were ungrateful for everything they'd done for us. What had they done? Bought us a $40 Target gift card and expected to be treated like royalty. The worst part was how they handled the gift opening. Every time we opened something they hadn't bought, William would make some comment about how practical or expensive it was. When we opened a beautiful handmade quilt from Clara's grandmother, he said, "Well, that's nice, but store-bought stuff is usually more durable." When we got a high-end baby monitor from my parents, Marilyn said, "In my professional experience, parents who rely too heavily on technology often become disconnected from their children." Meanwhile, Riley was posting Instagram stories, claiming she planned her sister's baby shower and taking credit for decorations Clara had spent weeks making by hand. When Clara confronted her about it, Riley said, "You're going to be too busy with the baby to maintain your social media anyway, so I'm helping." The final straw was Marilyn pulling Clara aside to say she was concerned about me as a father because I hadn't asked William for parenting advice. She suggested marriage counseling because I seemed resistant to family input. This woman was basically saying I'd become an abusive dad because I didn't worship her husband's parenting wisdom. She also mentioned that she'd been observing our dynamics throughout the pregnancy and had concerns about our communication patterns. Apparently, the fact that Clara and I made decisions together without consulting the family council was a red flag. Marilyn actually said she was worried we were creating an insular environment that would be unhealthy for the child. That night, Clara and I decided we were done. Once the baby came, we'd keep visits to holidays only and information on a need-to-know basis. We weren't cutting them off completely, but we weren't letting them turn our house into their personal playground either. After our son was born, we implemented what we thought were reasonable boundaries. No more random drop-ins. No more unsolicited parenting advice. No more treating our house like their second home. We asked them to call before visiting and to respect our parenting decisions. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. William started making comments about how we were keeping his grandson from him and how we didn't know what we were doing as parents. He'd bring up every minor thing. If our son had a diaper rash, it was because we weren't changing him frequently enough. If he was fussy during a visit, it was because we weren't feeding him properly. Everything became evidence of our incompetence. The breaking point came when Riley called Clara one night, absolutely losing it about how we were secretive and keeping their grandson from them. She was screaming about how we thought we were better than everyone and that we were stealing their grandson. She went on this rant about how Clara had changed since marrying me and how I was brainwashing her against her own family. I could hear this psycho screeching through the phone from across the room. When Clara started crying, I'd had enough. I took the phone and told Riley exactly what I thought of her tantrum. Listen here, you spoiled brat. This is our kid, not yours. We decide who sees him and when. Keep running your mouth and you won't see him at all. Then I hung up on her mid-sentence. Riley immediately called back, but we let it go to voicemail. She left a 5-minute message that was basically her having a complete breakdown, crying about how we were destroying the family and how she was going to make sure everyone knew what kind of people we really were. She ended by saying we'd regret treating the family this way. 2 weeks later, DCF showed up at our door with a warrant. The allegations were completely insane. They claimed we weren't feeding our son, left him crying all day, and Clara was supposedly using drugs. None of it was true. Our kid was happy, healthy, and hitting his milestones. Yeah, he was a smaller baby, but some kids just are. Here's the crazy part. Just 2 months before DCF showed up, our son had his 6-month checkup with Dr. Roth. The doctor gave him a clean bill of health and even complimented our parenting. I had those records sitting right there on our kitchen table when DCF arrived. Dr. Roth's notes clearly stated our son was thriving and we were attentive, engaged parents. The DCF worker who showed up was this stone-faced woman named Janet Mills, who treated us like we were already guilty. She had this clipboard and kept checking boxes while barely looking at our son. She wouldn't even look at the medical records. But this proves there's nothing wrong, I started. Sir, please don't interfere with our process. She cut me off, not even glancing at the papers. She didn't ask for Roth's info or check the charts. She'd made up her mind before walking in. I found out later that William had called their hotline 3 separate times over 2 weeks, each time escalating his claims. The first call was just concern about our son's weight. The second call included allegations about crying and possible neglect. The third call was when he claimed Clara was using drugs and that we were emotionally abusing our son by keeping him from family. But here's the thing. William had maybe spent 20 hours total around our baby since he was born. He didn't know our routine, didn't know our son's eating schedule, didn't know anything about our actual daily life. But he spoke with such confidence that DCF took it seriously. They placed our son directly with William, not some neutral foster family, with the exact person who made the false allegations. The legal process was a joke. We got assigned this public defender named Gary Thompson who was juggling 50 cases and barely knew our names. This guy looked like he'd been practicing law since dinosaurs roamed the earth and had about as much energy as a dead battery. Our first meeting was in his office. He spent most of the time looking for our file while I explained our situation. So they took your kid because, he asked, squinting at papers that probably weren't even ours. Because my father-in-law made false allegations, I repeated for the third time. Right. And you have medical records showing that our son is healthy and there's no evidence of abuse or neglect. Uh-huh, he made a note. Well, these cases usually take 6 to 8 months to resolve. 6 to 8 months. Just like that. Like my son was some case number instead of a human being who needed his parents. We were allowed supervised visits twice a week for 2 hours each. Imagine trying to bond with your own kid while some DCF worker judges everything you do. They scrutinized how I held him, how Clara fed him, even how we talked to him. I couldn't change his diaper without getting a performance review from some employee who probably couldn't change her own tire. The visits were at this depressing DCF office. Fluorescent lights, beige walls. It smelled like industrial cleaner and broken dreams. They had this family room with toys that looked like they'd been donated in the Clinton administration, and a couch that had seen things no couch should ever see. My son would cry when we had to leave, and it took everything I had not to grab him and run. But I knew that would only make things worse. During one visit, he kept reaching for me when the session ended, and the supervisor actually said he'll adjust to his new environment soon. New environment? He was 8 months old, not a rescue dog. 5 months. That's how long they kept our son from us. 5 months of missing everything. His first real laugh, crawling, pulling himself up, his first birthday. William got to see all of that while we sat at home with empty arms. Clara fell into this deep depression, where she'd sit in our son's nursery for hours holding his stuffed animals. We'd bought this house specifically because it had the perfect nursery, and now it was just a shrine to everything we'd lost. I had to stop her from buying baby food at the grocery store because she'd forget he wasn't there. She'd push the cart down the baby aisle and start grabbing formula and diapers before reality hit her. Work became my escape. I'd pull 12-hour days just to avoid going home to that empty house. My coworkers knew something was wrong, but how do you explain that your wife's father stole your kid? It sounds crazy even when it's true. I told my boss I was dealing with a family situation and left it at that. He was cool about it, let me work late and come in on weekends when I needed the distraction. My productivity actually went through the roof during those months. Nothing like soul-crushing grief to make you focus on spreadsheets. My manager kept praising my dedication, not knowing I was just avoiding going home to deal with my wife's crying and our son's empty room. My best friend Liam was the only person who really got how messed up this was. While everyone else gave us useless advice like be patient or the system will work itself out, Liam actually helped. He'd come over with pizza and drinks, let me vent about court hearings, and help research lawyers who might actually care. Liam had been my roommate in college, and we'd been through some serious stuff together. He's one of those friends who shows up without being asked and somehow always knows what you need. During this whole mess, he basically moved into our guest room for a few weeks when Clara was at her worst. Liam convinced me to document everything. Every phone call, every visit, every interaction with DCF. We ended up with a 40-page Google Doc by the end. He also helped me research everything we could find about Marilyn's career, William's background, and Riley's social media presence. Dude basically became our private investigator. The worst part was the court hearings. Every few weeks, we'd have to sit in this courtroom while lawyers argued about our fitness as parents. William would show up dressed in his best suit, playing the concerned grandfather role to perfection. He'd bring a briefcase like he was some kind of legal expert, filled with printouts of parenting articles and evidence of our inadequacy. During one hearing, William actually brought a photo album. This bastard had made a scrapbook of pictures with our son, like he was documenting some kind of rescue operation. He showed the judge photos of our son at family gatherings, pointing out how happy he looked with his real family. The judge was eating it up, nodding along like William was some kind of child development expert. Meanwhile, we looked like stressed-out messes because, shockingly, having your kid stolen tends to affect your appearance. Clara had lost 15 pounds and had dark circles under her eyes. I probably looked like I'd been living in my car. Every time we tried to present evidence of our good parenting, the judge would barely glance at it before moving on to the next item on the docket. The closest I came to completely losing it was at one of those family court sessions. William was giving his testimony about how concerned he was about our parenting, laying on the fake emotion thick. He actually teared up talking about how he feared for his grandson's safety and how difficult it was to make the call to DCF. Pure theater, but the judge was eating it up. He went into this whole speech about how he'd served his country and understood the importance of protecting the innocent. Your Honor, I didn't want to believe my own daughter was putting her child at risk, but as a grandfather and a veteran, I couldn't stand by and watch. The man should have gotten an Oscar for that performance. During recess, I followed William out to the parking garage. He was checking his phone, probably texting Riley about his Oscar-worthy performance, when he saw me walking toward him. For a split second, his mask dropped, and I saw this smug satisfaction cross his face, like he was proud of himself for fooling everyone. Enjoying yourself? I said, getting close enough that he had to back against his car. I don't know what you mean, he replied, but that little smirk was still there. You're getting off on this. Playing the hero while my kid cries himself to sleep asking for his dad. My voice was getting quieter, which should have been his first warning. You think this is all a game? William tried to pull his grandfather act. I'm just trying to protect... Shut up. I stepped closer. You stole my son because your feelings got hurt. You're a pathetic old man who can't stand not being in control. When he started to say something else, probably another lie about protection, I grabbed his shirt and slammed him back against his car. The look of real fear in his eyes was the first honest emotion I'd seen from him in months. His phone clattered to the ground, and for a second he looked exactly like what he was, a scared, weak old man who'd gotten in over his head. If you ever hurt my family again, I will end you. Not threaten, not scare. End. The words came out in this cold whisper that surprised even me. Do you understand? William nodded, suddenly looking every bit the scared old man he really was. I let go and walked away, leaving him shaking by his car. Part of me wanted to go back and finish what I'd started, but I knew that would only prove their point about me being dangerous. That night, I told Liam what happened. He just nodded and said, "Good. That bastard needed to know you're not just going to roll over. But next time, make sure there aren't any cameras around." Then he bought me a beer, and we spent the rest of the evening planning our next legal moves. When our son was finally returned at 13 months old, something was still off. He was still smaller than he should be, still seemed uncomfortable after eating, still not sleeping well. The first thing Clara did was schedule an appointment with a new pediatrician for a complete workup. Dr. Martinez was amazing. Unlike Dr. Roth, who was competent but kind of old school, Dr. Martinez was younger and really up to date on the latest research. She actually listened, instead of rubber stamping whatever DCF told her. She spent an hour with us during that first visit, asking detailed questions about our son's history, his symptoms, and what we'd observed. "Tell me about his eating patterns," she said, actually taking notes while we talked. "He's always been fussy after bottles," Clara explained. "Even as a newborn, he'd get really uncomfortable and pull his legs up. Has anyone ever tested for food allergies?" We looked at each other. Dr. Roth said some babies are just smaller, and that he'd grow out of it. Dr. Martinez frowned. "How long has this been going on?" "Since birth, basically." She ordered comprehensive testing, blood work, allergy panels, stool samples, the works. The blood draw alone took 3 vials, but our son was a trooper. Within a week, we had our answer: severe milk protein allergy. Our son had been allergic to milk this entire time. Every drop of formula he'd been given was essentially poisoning his digestive system. No wonder he wasn't gaining weight properly. His body literally couldn't process what he was being fed. It was like trying to run a car on the wrong fuel. It'll run, but it's going to damage the engine. Dr. Martinez explained that milk protein allergies can be really subtle in babies. It's not like he's breaking out in hives or having obvious reactions. Instead, it's this chronic inflammation that prevents proper nutrient absorption. We see it all the time, but it often gets missed because the symptoms are so gradual. The irony was bitter. Dr. Roth had missed it at the 6-month checkup, not out of negligence, but because the symptoms were subtle, and our son was still growing, just slowly. But if DCF had bothered to actually consult with our pediatrician, instead of dismissing his records, Dr. Roth could have suggested allergy testing when weight concerns were first raised. I felt this mixture of rage and vindication that I can't even describe. We'd been right all along. There was nothing wrong with our parenting. Our son had a medical condition that nobody bothered to investigate. DCF spent 5 months treating us like criminals, instead of ordering a simple $200 allergy test. Within 2 weeks of switching to a hypoallergenic formula, our son started gaining weight and seemed like a completely different kid. He was happier, sleeping better, actually acting like the healthy baby he'd always been. But here's the real slap in the face. None of this mattered to DCF. Even with medical proof that explained everything, they wouldn't admit they'd made a mistake. Janet Mills actually suggested that we had somehow caused the allergy through our poor parenting. The logic was insane. Apparently, we were simultaneously neglecting our son and also somehow giving him food allergies through unknown bad parenting techniques. Getting our son back should have been the happy ending, but it was really just the beginning of a new nightmare. The DCF case means we're flagged forever. Future background checks will show we were investigated for child abuse, even though we were cleared. If we have more kids, if we move to a new state, if we want to volunteer at our son's school someday, this will follow us around like a scarlet letter. William acted like nothing happened. He expected to continue his regular visits, like he hadn't just participated in kidnapping his own grandson. When we told him he wasn't welcome anymore, he had the nerve to act surprised. But I was just trying to help, like he was some kind of hero who'd saved the day. The confrontation happened 2 weeks after we got our son back. I was working from home when I heard car doors in our driveway. Through the window, I saw the whole crew walking up to our front door like they owned the place. They had bags with them, toys and clothes, like they were planning some kind of reunion celebration. They didn't knock, just tried to walk right in like they always had. I met them at the door and blocked their path. "What do you want?" William put on his fake concerned grandfather act. We just want to see our grandson. We've been worried sick about him. He actually tried to look around me into the house. Where is he? Is he okay? Your grandson? You mean the kid you had stolen from us for 5 months based on lies? Marilyn stepped forward with her professional voice. Let's all calm down. Family needs to work through their differences. In my professional experience, holding grudges isn't healthy for children. We're not family anymore. You people are done. You're not seeing my son, you're not coming in my house, and if you don't get off my property right now, I'm calling the cops. Riley started her usual drama, clutching the bag of toys she'd brought. You can't keep us from our nephew. We have rights. We love him. You have the right to shut up and leave. Your rights ended when you helped steal my kid. You people don't know what love is. They tried to push past me, actually tried to force their way into my house. William put his hand on the doorframe and tried to shoulder past me while Marilyn kept talking about what's best for the child. That's when I lost it completely. I stepped outside and got right in William's face, close enough to smell the coffee on his breath. Touch my door again and see what happens. You want to call DCF? Go ahead, but you'll be calling them from a hospital bed. Something in my voice must have convinced them I wasn't playing games, because they finally backed down. But not before William shouted something about how we'd regret this, and they weren't done with us yet. Riley was crying about how we were destroying the family, while Marilyn kept insisting they had legal rights as grandparents. I filed for restraining orders the next day. The process was a pain, but having documented evidence of their harassment helped our case. The judge granted temporary orders, and we had a hearing scheduled for permanent ones. We decided to leave Washington completely, found a job opportunity in North Carolina, bought a house site unseen, and planned to start over where nobody knows our business. I'm taking a 10K pay cut, but it's worth it for peace of mind. The job hunt was actually easier than expected. My current employer gave me a great reference, and my experience with accounting translated well to corporate work. The company in North Carolina was growing fast and needed someone who could handle complex financial reporting. During the interview, they asked why I wanted to relocate, and I just said I was looking for a fresh start. They didn't pry. Before leaving, we took every precaution, changed phone numbers, and locked down social media. We also set up new email addresses and closed all our old accounts. Liam helped coordinate the move like a military operation. We hired movers, but Liam personally loaded all our important documents and valuables into his truck and drove them to North Carolina himself. The man took 3 days off work just to help us escape these lunatics. We thought moving to North Carolina would be the end of it, but William, Marilyn, and Riley had other plans. Life here has been amazing. New job is solid, our son is thriving, and we can finally breathe. But about 2 months after we moved, Clara started getting friend requests from fake Facebook profiles. The accounts had generic names like Sarah Johnson and stock photo profile pictures, but they all had mutual friends from our old area. We figured it was them tracking us down, so we reported and blocked them. Then Clara's cousins started getting weird calls from people claiming to conduct wellness checks on us. Someone calling themselves a family advocate asked detailed questions about our mental health, our financial situation, and whether we seemed stable in our new environment. Clara's cousin was smart enough to hang up and call us immediately. But the real escalation came when Marilyn somehow got our new address and started calling our son's daycare. She told them she was his grandmother and was concerned about his welfare because we'd moved him away from family support. She even claimed she had professional knowledge, that we were unstable parents, and suggested they conduct their own welfare check. The daycare director actually called us about it. I've been running this center for 15 years, she said, and I've never had a grandmother call to report her own family. It seemed really strange, so I wanted to let you know. Thank God for reasonable people who can spot crazy when they see it. That was the moment I realized Liam had been right all along. We needed to go on offense. I hired a lawyer who specializes in civil rights violations and professional misconduct. Samuel Rodriguez had a reputation for taking on government agencies and winning big settlements. What they did to you isn't just morally wrong, he told us during our first meeting. It's actionable. We're talking about conspiracy, abuse of government resources, filing false reports, and civil rights violations. These people are going to pay. He immediately started pulling phone records, gathering evidence, and building our case. He had contacts in multiple states and knew exactly which agencies to pressure for information. Within 2 weeks, he'd filed formal complaints with Oregon DCF, the Washington State Attorney General's office, and the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. The investigation into Marilyn was swift and brutal. Oregon DCF took this seriously once they understood what she'd done. But what really sealed her fate was an internal whistleblower. One of Marilyn's co-workers, a woman named Susan Carter, had been suspicious about her behavior for months. Susan had noticed Marilyn making a lot of personal calls during work hours and bragging about helping family with a case in another state. She'd even overheard Marilyn on the phone saying things like, "Trust me, I know how these cases work, and they'll take my word for it." When Marilyn started accessing confidential databases to look up information about people she had no business investigating, Susan started keeping a log. "I've worked here for 15 years," Susan told investigators, "and I've never seen anyone abuse their position like this." The deposition was beautiful. Samuel had Marilyn under oath for 4 hours, and she fell apart completely. She tried playing the professional concerned grandmother at first, but when confronted with phone records and database access logs, she started contradicting herself left and right. By hour 3, Marilyn was crying and trying to claim she was just a concerned grandmother. But the damage was done. The transcripts showed she'd used her professional credentials to fast-track our case and explicitly told Washington workers they should trust her judgment because she'd worked similar cases. Samuel read her own words back to her. "This is a legitimate case. I've seen this pattern before in my professional work. You need to act quickly before something happens to this child." She'd literally weaponized her job to steal our kid. But wait, it gets better. During the investigation, they discovered Marilyn had been using her access to run background checks on people she had personal disputes with, including us. That's identity theft and abuse of government resources. The feds got involved when they realized the scope of her unauthorized activities. This wasn't her first rodeo either. The investigation uncovered a pattern going back years. She'd been using her position to settle personal scores with neighbors, ex-friends, even her kids' teachers, who gave grades she didn't like. One case was particularly damning. Marilyn had run multiple searches on a former friend who'd stopped inviting her to book club meetings. She'd accessed this woman's credit report, employment history, and even her children's school records. When confronted with this evidence, Marilyn claimed she was concerned about the children's welfare because the woman seemed unstable. But text messages between Marilyn and Riley showed the real reason. "That witch thinks she's too good for us. Let's see what skeletons she's hiding." William's world started falling apart next. Once Marilyn got fired, she threw him under the bus to save herself. She provided Samuel with recordings of phone calls where William admitted he'd exaggerated his concerns because he was tired of being shut out. She even had text messages where he talked about teaching us a lesson about respecting elders. The moment William realized he was screwed was beautiful. Samuel arranged for the recordings to be played during his deposition, and you could see his face just crumble when he heard his own voice saying, "Maybe if they lose the kid for a while, they'll appreciate family more." The man aged 10 years in 10 seconds. In another recording, William was even more explicit. "These kids need to learn there are consequences for disrespecting family. If taking the baby away for a few months makes them realize how much they need us, then that's what needs to happen." When confronted with this evidence, William tried to claim he was just venting and didn't really mean it. But Samuel had more. Phone records showed William had called the DCF hotline 6 times over 3 weeks, each time escalating his claims. In the first call, he expressed mild concern about his grandson's weight. By the 6th call, he was claiming Clara was using heroin and that we were emotionally and physically abusing our son. Riley's downfall was almost funny. Once her parents' situation became public in their small town, people started asking questions about that GoFundMe she opened. One of Clara's cousins had screenshot Riley's Instagram stories, showing expensive shopping hauls and a Vegas trip just weeks after the fundraiser closed. She had posted dozens of stories over a long weekend, showing her gambling, expensive clubs, and designer clothes. She'd even posted receipts from her shopping sprees, bragging about her retail therapy and how she was treating herself after a hard year. Riley's friend group found out about the fraud investigation at a birthday party when someone mentioned seeing her name in the local paper's police blotter. "Wait," said one of her friends. "You raised money for your family's legal bills and then blew it in Vegas?" Riley tried to claim the trips were emotional support and that she'd used her own money, but the dates didn't lie. The GoFundMe closed on a Thursday, and she was posting about her shopping spree the following Monday. The confrontation got heated when another friend pointed out that people had donated their hard-earned money thinking they were helping a child in crisis. "My mom gave you $50 because she felt sorry for your nephew," one girl said. "She's going to be pissed when she finds out you spent it on Louis Vuitton." Riley's entire friend group turned on her that night. One of them actually called her out publicly on Facebook, posting side-by-side photos of the GoFundMe description and Riley's Vegas shopping with the caption, "This is why I don't trust fake people." The state attorney general's office got very interested when someone provided evidence that donors were questioning the fund's legitimacy and their concerns were being deleted. Riley had been systematically removing comments asking where the money went, but several people had screenshot those comments before deletion. Our lawsuit is moving forward, and Samuel is confident we'll win substantial damages. We're going after them for legal fees, lost wages, moving expenses, emotional distress, and punitive damages. The number we're looking at would basically bankrupt all three of them. William went from middle management to unemployed when security escorted him out of his building. His security clearance got suspended pending resolution of the criminal charges, and his employer couldn't keep him on without clearance. Liam's friend who works there said William tried to claim he was being persecuted for being a concerned grandfather, but nobody bought it. Marilyn lost her career and is facing federal charges for computer fraud and identity theft. Her pension is frozen pending the outcome of criminal proceedings. Riley's looking at fraud charges and having to pay back the GoFundMe money with interest and penalties. The state is also investigating whether she owes taxes on the money she received, since she basically treated it as personal income. Her part-time candle shop job doesn't exactly provide the income needed to pay back thousands in fraudulent donations. The restraining orders transferred to North Carolina, so they can't legally contact us here either. If they try to show up, it's an automatic arrest warrant. We've also gotten the court to extend the orders to include electronic contact, so they can't try to reach us through social media or email. Our son is doing amazing. He's gained weight, hitting all his milestones, and doesn't even remember the people who tried to destroy our family. Last weekend, I took him to this little diner for breakfast. Nothing fancy, just one of those places with red vinyl booths and coffee that's been sitting too long. He's getting to the age where he wants to do everything himself, so I let him try using a fork on his scrambled eggs. Made a complete mess, got more food on the table than in his mouth, but he was so proud. The waitress, an older woman probably in her 60s, watched him struggle with the fork and smiled. "He's determined," she said. "I bet he's going to be trouble when he gets older." I laughed and told her he already was. She brought him extra napkins and a little cup of fruit, saying she had grandkids and knew how messy they could get. Sitting there, watching him laugh at his mess while this stranger showed him simple kindness, I realized this was exactly what those bastards tried to take from us. Not just the big moments, but these quiet Sunday mornings, where it's just me and my kid figuring out breakfast together. When we were leaving, he grabbed my finger and looked up at me with those big eyes. "Dada?" he said, clear as day. It was maybe the 20th time he'd said it, but it still hit me like a truck. To anyone dealing with toxic family members who think they can weaponize the system against you, document everything, get good legal representation, and don't let them intimidate you into silence. The truth has a way of coming out eventually, and when it does, make sure you're ready to fight back. Clara and I are stronger than ever now. Our son is healthy and happy, and we're building the life we always wanted. Meanwhile, William, Marilyn, and Riley are dealing with lawyers, unemployment, criminal charges, and the reality that actions have consequences. Game over. We won.